Today I will explain how Yuji Itadori, after eating the 6 remaining cursed wombs, will sacrifice himself by consuming the cursed object Prison Realm, with Gojo Satoru inside, as he already did with the cursed object Sukuna's fingers, thus freeing Gojo and letting him take over his body so that he can then defeat Kenjaku and Sukuna. But there's a bit of a twist. It is possible that after Gojo is freed with the help of Itadori, Kenjaku could use Geto's ability to absorb him from Itadori's body and thus take possession of Gojo's power. However, this is only possible if the prison realm has changed Gojo's soul, so that Geto's ability can absorb him accordingly. Perhaps this was the true purpose of the prison realm all along. Let's talk about it. If you end up liking this video, consider subscribing. Please enjoy this video. Let's go! The reason I think this will be Gojo's fate is because Gojo's existence as a character in terms of his power just doesn't make sense. At least not when Gojo is on the side of the good people, because otherwise he just doesn't give the main villains a chance. This takes away all the tension and makes all the other characters irrelevant, especially the main character of the series. How can Itadori be the hero of the story as long as someone like Gojo exists? So just locking him up in the prison for the time being and then freeing him and having him save the world makes no sense. And even if they were able to defeat Kenjaku and Sukuna without Gojo and then free him at the end of the series, that will only solve the problem of Gojo taking away all the tension. But it wouldn't answer the question of why Gojo exists as a character in the series in the first place. He will just be an extremely overpowered, pointless character that doesn't really contribute anything to the story. Think about it, with the current situation, the entire series could have been done without Gojo. And the development of the story would have been the same if you get another person to make Itadori eat the fingers of Sukuna. This whole situation goes so far that I have seen people think that the creator of Jujutsu Kaisen thinks they made a mistake by creating Gojo, which is why they had to lock him up in a prison. This is totally absurd. I think the truth behind Gojo's existence and use for this series is quite different. This character exists not to be a help to the sorcerers, but to make the bad characters even stronger by making his power their own. Therefore, it is possible that the true purpose and essence of the prison realm is not simply to imprison Gojo, but to change his soul so that he's no longer a human, but a being that Kenjaku can absorb with the help of Geto's ability after Yuji frees him. This would give Kenjaku the strongest power there is, the 6 eyes, which would also make Gojo no longer the strongest living person, but Kenjaku, the main villain, as it's supposed to be for such series. The main villain must become the strongest so that the heroes can surpass him and defeat him together. That's why I think Gojo exists. Let me prove you my idea with the help of the new chapter. With the new Jujutsu Kaisen chapter, the series enters the final phase of the manga. Kenjaku added 2 new rules. No one can enter the calling game anymore, and the game ends when all players except Geto and Fushiguro are dead. To put it simply, if they defeat both Kenjaku and Sukuna, the manga is officially over. Unless there's a secret villain like Tengen, for example. Because of this new endgame development, it makes sense that Gojo is now making a reappearance, and consequently it was hinted in this chapter that he is indeed finally returning. However, simply freeing him is boring. It has to be something more complicated, which is why I assume that any plan the Jujutsu sorcerer have to free Gojo will fail, until one of them makes a drastic decision and sacrifices himself. The biggest clue for this idea was Yuji's statement in this chapter that he is willing to eat anything as long as it means Sukuna can be defeated. This basically means that he is willing to sacrifice his own life to defeat the king of all curses. If you think about the sentence, the way he phrases it gives the impression that he's willing to take any consequence that comes from eating cursed objects. Consequences in this regard usually mean only 2 things. Either the person consuming the object dies or loses control. And so Itadori, knowing the possible consequences, has hinted at the possibility that he may have already done something crazy in this regard, which could ultimately prove the possibility that he's even willing to go a big step further. After saying that he will eat anything to defeat Sukuna, we see him approach Choso and thank him. The reason for the thanks was their siblings. It was not explained exactly, but based on Choso's response, we can assume that Itadori consumed the 6 remaining cursed wombs. Choso's answers that it's okay, as long as they can live on as part of Itadori, everything is fine. Right after he said that, implying that Yuji had indeed consumed the remaining 6 cursed wombs. The whole Gojo returning thing was shown and hinted at in the manga, which could thus hint at the possibility that whatever Itadori did with the wombs, he's also willing to do with the prison realm. This fits with what he said about being willing to eat anything, supporting my idea that he could consume the prison realm to free Gojo. By consuming the cursed wombs, Itadori should have manifested the corresponding powers as his own to compensate for the loss of Sukuna's power. And there are many indications for this. First of all, Itadori said that the fact that Sukuna no longer resides in him doesn't change anything. Sukuna never helped Itadori and never gave him his power, apart from the cursed energy. But he never had access to Sukuna's domain expansion or his cursed techniques. This is most likely what Itadori meant. But when he consumes his own siblings, the situation is quite different. We have seen that the 9 or rather 10 siblings have an unknown connection that forces them to always be there for each other. This was symbolized by the fact that they have memories that do not exist and yet are real to them. So they have this sibling relationship from birth without having to live with each other for a long time, or be alive for a long time in general. And therefore there's the possibility that Itadori, instead of only being able to use the cursed energy of his siblings, like he was able to use Sukuna's cursed energy, he will gain the power of 6 different beings and make it completely his own. Which fits perfectly with what Choso and Yuji mentioned, that Itadori can't use the power of someone who doesn't want to give him his power, which is the exact opposite of the ideology of the 10 siblings. But what powers could Itadori gain by consuming the remaining wombs? We can actually determine the identity of the remaining cursed wombs. Kusozu's The Art of Corpses, a Japanese genre of painting with Buddha's ideology. It describes the 9 stages of decay, with Choso being the first, Eso the second, and Kechizuso the third. The remaining 6 are thus Nuranso, Shuoso, Tanso, Sanso, Kotsuso, and Shoso. Since all these stages describe the process of decomposition, each stage has a different decomposition in terms of blood and body. Choso, for example, had pretty much clean blood since he was the first stage. Eso's blood was already toxic, and Kechizuso was literally rotten. I think in the fight against them they even complained about their smell. So if Yuji has consumed all the remaining wombs, it is likely that his ability has something to do with the decomposition process. Certainly also with the blood attribute due to the connection to the Kamo family. Let's hope he will not stink. Also, Itadori would have to become a half-human, half-cursed spirit for each womb he consumes. This is because their mother was able to give birth to human spirit hybrids. So after consuming a single one of these wombs, he should theoretically become a half-human, half-cursed spirit. Unless his body functions differently, because if he really did consume all 6 wombs, it is apparent from the chapter that he is still himself. But that will surely be explained at some point in the course of the next chapters. The possibility that he is no longer human definitely exists. Thus, with 6 of these wombs, only a small part of his humanity will remain. Not to mention the fact that Itadori has been described as being much more like a cursed item now anyway, imbued with cursed energy known as Sukuna. And fully incarnated death painting wombs are even considered to be special class cursed spirits. So Itadori probably has nothing to do with a human being anymore. In addition, his birth wasn't normal to begin with, so he's not a normal human anyway. It is as if Itadori loses more and more humanity the further the series progresses. And as mentioned at the beginning, it could be that Itadori could go on like this until he possibly gets the idea to consume the prison realm with a Gojo, if they have no other way to free him. Itadori is the kind of person who will do that. The basic idea is is more or less the same as Sukuna's finger, and we actually have some similarities between the prison realm and the 20 fingers. The eyes, the damage done by the cursed object. The person trapped inside is aware of their own world, which looks a bit like a domain. In both worlds there are skeletons and an ominous atmosphere. And since cursed objects can be used for incarnations, there may actually be a possibility that Gojo and the prison realm have merged, which could make incarnation possible. This incarnation process is described as the fusion of a cursed object with human flesh. In most cases, the host's body is completely taken over, and its consciousness is suppressed. Yuji was able to resist Sukuna and possibly the 6 wombs, but Gojo is a completely different level. It is possible that even if Yuji were to try to maintain control, that Gojo's cursed energy is simply too strong. And even if Gojo has no intention of taking over Itadori's body, he may simply have no choice. But even if everything went perfectly as I described, there would still be 2 things that just don't fit a proper manga ending. First, the strongest living person can't be the hero of the story if it's not the main character. And the main character also can't just die before the manga ends without really contributing anything to defeating the main villain. Both of these problems can be solved if we assume that the prison realm has changed Gojo's soul so that Kenjaku can absorb him with Geto's ability after Gojo manifests in Itadori's body. Thus, all the problems will be solved. Gojo will be freed, however his strength will no longer stand in the way of the story. Itadori will return as the main character with his new power without Sukuna, and the main villain will become the most powerful person in the series as it should be. So what do you think of this Jujutsu Kaisen theory? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like, it really helps me a lot. And if you want to see more Jujutsu Kaisen videos, theories and chapter reviews, then subscribe to this channel with the notification bell activated. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye.